I have declared war against my brain in order to save my mind. The battle wounds don't seem to bother me so long as I know they will heal with time. And the scars remind me to appreciate the days I don't have to.
These are some great pictures. What great production value you had on this.
Yeah.
Jeez. What a...
I know, John, you told me something that made me howl, but when you guys were working on that show and new scripts would come in, Michael would read one, and you could tell when he was going to come tell you his concerns about the script, because he always had them, because you could hear the spurs clanging down the hallway.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I had an early warning system with Michael. Uh-oh, here he comes.
Here he comes.
And the writer would run out of my room across the hallway to the writer's office, so she didn't have to listen.
We were supposed to save that one, Jim, for the podcast. This is
I thought we are podcasting at this point.
You actually are recording right now.
Okay,
so.
good. Well, did you get that whole thing?
Yeah, all I got was when Jim started talking, pretty much right after you picked up the book.
After I picked up the book. Yeah, okay. Okay, so, Jim, I've been talking to John since we got here, and Caleb has set up at his house, and we've just kind of had a nonstop fun conversation, picked it up where we were 25 years ago or so. And John, I kind of prepared some stuff because, I wanted to become and I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that you've done in the past. But tell Jim and anybody who's ever going to be listening to this a little bit about what you're doing right now. And we'll talk about your past when we get into some of the films that you did in the past. What you're doing now, what you were telling me in the back room.
Yeah, I'm now a professor at USC School of Cinematic Arts, which I don't know, I love. It's probably a favorite part of my career. I kind of discovered this second career that is such fun. I mean, I discovered that I know something. Like you're basically working away all your life, and trying to make ends meet, and hopefully make a bit of money. And then when I first started teaching, I realized I had this whole wealth of knowledge and experience that the young filmmakers actually wanted to know about. Like my first class, I went in and I was terrified, and I had my agenda figured out, and I got through my agenda in about an hour, and it was a 3-hour class. So I'm like, what do I do now? And I said, anybody got any questions? And 2 hours later, I was still answering, because I realized that I've done so much stuff in documentaries and features and television, and I've done it almost every role there is to make on a movie. I actually know something, and that's really a wonderful realization. So I've enjoyed very much giving of what I know, and vicariously making films through my students and helping them achieve their dreams. And I don't know, the process never gets old, like the process of going from words on a page to images on a screen. I just love it, and I'm doing it every semester over and over. It's such fun.
You mentioned from words on the page until pictures on the screen. Yeah. What about before words on the page? Because that's, when I think of acting and when I think about the roles that I've played, the most important thing for me are the word. And I think most actors would tell you the most important things are the words on the page and getting a script that is good. And you're a writer, and you've always written, and you edit all the right. John, you've had and we were talking about this earlier, an unbelievable career as far as diversity, as far as there's so much stuff that you had. I mean, Magnificent Seven was a big experience for me in my life, and you were always there, and I know that we were both very disappointed when we couldn't get that over the top and do 5 or 6, 7 years of it. But I was not that familiar with the fact that we did 22 of those shows.
Yeah.
And they were, they were important. They were a big part of my life. And I look back at that, and I said to you before that one of the biggest disappointments, and I don't, I go up for things all the time and don't get them and stuff. But one of the biggest disappointments for me in my life was that we couldn't get that over the top. We did 22 episodes of that. And then I started looking into your background a little bit more now that we got computers and all that kind of stuff and the internet. And, 22 episodes of that. You did 69 episodes of Poltergeist, 89 episodes of Outer Limits. And
I think we did more than that. I think it was we did
seasons.
I'm just pulling this stuff off.
7 seasons, 22 a season. Yeah, we did.
Tell me a little bit about which one are you talking about?
The Outer Limits.
The Outer Limits. How many did you do?
I think it's 7 times 22.
Okay,
whatever that is.
Okay, Jim.
We're up to about 154 on that one, Mark.
Yeah, and the thing about them was it was a different story every week. It's not like like the Magnificent Seven. At least we had the same characters every week, and they lived in the same town, and we were able to. With Outer Limits, and again with Twilight Zone, which I also did, we had to start from scratch every week, write a new movie every week. So it was challenging.
You had one episode I watched when I was hospitalized with my ailment, where the character was in a situation very much like mine. It made my situation even more horrifying. Truly, some guy in a mental hospital.
Yeah.
I remember really terrifying.
Right.
And I got in the
Masters of the
Magnificent
1990s Outer Limits. There was another series prior to us.
Back in the 60s?
So you may have caught one of
I'm
those.
old
You may have
enough. I
caught one of the older
remember
ones.
those from my childhood.
And I'm old enough to have watched the Twilight Zone, and the Twilight Zone came out first, and then back in the 60s, and then Outer Limits came out.
Yeah.
But Outer Limits, they put a whole new kind of spin on it. And
we did the other way around. We did 7 seasons of the Outer Limits, and then we did a couple of seasons of Twilight Zone after that. So that was much less seen than the original Twilight Zone, but I think they were pretty damn good.
Tell Jim a little bit about the movie what you told me about the movie about USC, because he was going to go to went to Stanford grad and all that.
One of the great things about being teaching a professor at USC is I get to make movies outside as well. So it hasn't stopped my career. I get to be I get to be more selective now. So I've made 3 or 4 films since I've been there. And the latest one is a movie that I'm doing for Village Roadshow, who optioned a book called Turning of the Tide, which is about the 1970s football game between USC, coached by John McKay, and Bear Bryant's Alabama. The book is called Turning of the Tide because it's perceived to be the game that changed initially the Crimson Tide, but also the whole South. From refusing to have any black players to suddenly they started recruiting black players. So now when you watch Alabama today, you'll have a hard time finding a white face. It's completely changed. So this game...
I don't think they've had a white quarterback in decades at Alabama.
Exactly. So this game is perceived to be the game that turned the tide because SC went out there and kicked their butt and taught them a lesson. So... from then on, we better start recruiting black players. So I'm supervising this movie, and I've been fortunate to be able to
interesting to be a professor at FC and have FC be the subject of the film, too.
There you go.
Especially FC in the John McKay days. Those are really legendary.
Right.
And Bear Bryant.
So I'm recruiting all, so far, all USC alumni. And so far, all black USC students to be part of the project. So it's
cool.
It's been really, really fun.
Is it okay for you to tell us again about what was brought to you and what?
There's no secrets here. I mean, the book is a fascinating book. It was written by a guy called Don Yeager, working with Sam Cunningham, who is the star of the game.
Sam the Bam Cunningham.
Sam the Bam. Yeah. And John Papadakis, who was another player on the team who I've become good friends with, who lives near me. And so Don was interviewing them and creating the book. The the slant of the book when Village Roadshow brought it to me, I didn't feel was fresh enough or completely accurate. I mean, it kind of portrays McKay and Brand as these enlightened guys who changed the world, and my perspective was, I feel like I've seen the movie about the inspirational coach who changes the world around, and I've also don't fully believe that they were enlightened human beings. I think they were two of the world's greatest ever college football coaches, but they were about winning football games, not about changing the world. I think that
they weren't voices of enlightenment, I would say.
I think that was kind of a byproduct. So I said, look, I don't really want to do that movie, but I would like to make a movie about the black players. I'd like to make a movie about Sam Cunningham and his buddies and what that experience was like, living on the campus in the middle of the Vietnam era, in the middle of the Black Power movement, when black students were very, very small minority of students. There were hardly any black women on campus. There was a lot of racism within the campus. USC, let's face it, was a very conservative place. Mm-hmm. And these guys had to go out to Alabama and into the deep South, endure dreadful racism and hatred and abuse in a gigantic stadium where there was hardly a black face there, and there'd never been a black player step foot on that field before. I said, to me, that's a really interesting story. And Village Roadshow said, yes, we love it. Boom, do it. And I said, well, look, I'm not a black guy, so I want to hire black students. So I brought on 5 of my former students, 4 black men and 1 black woman, and together they wrote the screenplay with my supervision. And
how great.
Yeah, the Village Roadshow are really excited about it. They brought one of the writers on as a director now, a young man called C. Craig, who is fantastic. And hopefully we'll get to go make the movie. I don't know.
John, the thing that's I find sort of interesting about the whole thing is that I was a freshman in high school in 1970, and I lived in Arizona in the town Lake Havasu City when I went to high school. I grew up in Nebraska. I grew up at the Y, black kids all the time. I was so unaware of how racist the country was when I was a freshman in high. Well, there were no black kids in my high school, but I just was so unaware of what was going on. But like not only in the South, but like you say, everywhere, and still to this day. I mean, it's something that we have to kind of keep our heads on straight. John, I wanted to talk to you about some of the films that you've done in the past, if I could, because there's one in particular that I didn't know anything about, and there's another one in particular I would like to hear about because it was such a fun movie. And the one that I'm talking about that it seems like such a great movie was Backdraft.
Oh yeah.
And Ron Howard directed that. Now, I met Ron once for Apollo 13. Is it Apollo 13, Jim?
It would have been, yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't cast me, but he's supposed to be like the nicest, most wonderful, never gets upset,
can't put the lie to that. I don't want to put the lie to that. Ron is terrific, really terrific.
Yeah. There is a shot in the movie, because I watched it recently, where Kurt Russell is standing up about 3 stories. And he starts talking at the top of the 3 stories, and he jumps down to the 2nd story, then he jumps down to the 1st story, then he jumps down to the ground. He's talking the entire time, and he comes straight into that close-up. Are you aware of that shot? Yeah. It's just a fantastic shot. And, just so anybody who's listening to this knows, Kurt Russell stars in it. Donald Sutherland is in it. Yeah. Robert De Niro is in it. Scott Glenn is in it. You know who the stunt coordinator was, right? You remember Walter Scott?
Walter Scott, yeah.
Walter Scott
went on to be the stunt coordinator on The Magnificent Seven.
And Walter Scott, I believe I saw, and I liked Walter. We got along really well because I was always willing to get dirty, and fall down and say, I don't need those pads, Walter. But I think that I was watching Apocalypse. What, Jim? Apocalypse Now and
Apocalypse 13.
No.
Apocalypse Now. No, Apollo 13. I was just thinking Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Were you watching Apocalypse Now or Apocalypse Now Redux? That's
and anyway, I think that he did the stunts on that, and Scott Glenn.
Yeah,
Scott Glenn was in that also. Yeah. So you got and I got to say, Kurt Russell to me is the soul of that movie. Mm-hmm. Kurt Russell is so effing good. He is so good in that movie. And, he was also in Tombstone and almost everything he does. But,
you work with him.
I did work with him, and I loved working with him. And can you tell me, from the beginning, where the idea came from, who wrote, and just kind of talk me through.
The idea came from a UCLA student called Greg Wyden, who I can't remember.
Are you allowed to say UCLA?
I am allowed to say that. I'm not one of those guys who cares that much about. I'm English, I care about the Oxford-Cambridge rivalry, but UCLA, USC, whatever.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
As long as he's a good writer, I don't care where he's come from. So Greg, it was based on Greg's own experience as a firefighter in Chicago, and he. He basically, I remember him saying, axe first, hose later was kind of like one of the philosophies of and I loved it. And he was telling stories about, these guys.
Hose is in fire hose?
They were the way they used to light up as soon as they put the fire out, they'd all be down there, cleaning up and all smoking. And it was like, real macho philosophy. And anyway, he came out with this story, and it had a little checkered career in development. We developed it at Dino De Laurentiis' film company, which I think went out of business. Anyway, the script ended up as like a bit of a waif, and it was Raffaele De Laurentiis who told Ron Howard about it, and Ron read the script and loved it and declared it was going to be his next movie. And then we went into what is referred to as development hell, which
who was the first person? Was it Raffaella, who I worked with before? But was it her or was it you? How did you get involved if Raffaella was the person?
Oh, well, I got involved from the very beginning with Greg Wyden. Greg was his idea based on his story.
So
he and I developed it with my partners Penn Densham and Richard Lewis. We developed the screenplay together at Dino's company. Dino's company paid for the first 2 or 3 drafts.
Okay, got it.
And then it became a waif. They went into Turnaround, as it's known, and it was picked up by Ron Howard. And I believe that Raffaella was the one that told Ron about it.
Okay.
So then we started working with Ron and Brian at Imagine, and we went into development hell, to be honest with you. I mean, they decided to bring in another writer and then another writer and then another writer.
Who's they?
Ron and Brian.
Okay.
And the screenplay was going nowhere. And it was, Ron decided, I remember he called up and he said, I'm sorry, guys, I'm taking this other movie. And, I know I said it was my next film, but it's just not, the script's not coming together. And we said, hey, Ron, give us a break here. We've been through a lot of drafts. We kind of know what you want. We kind of know what the best is of all these drafts. Give us the weekend. So my partners and I and Greg Wyden got together over the weekend and we rewrote the script from beginning to end. Say rewrote. I don't know there was anything that was brand new. It was just more like cutting and pasting the greatest hits of all the various drafts together. And the following week, we gave Ron the script and said, here you go. We got it. And he said, you're right. You nailed it. I'm back in. And so we got into pre-production, and the movie got made that very year.
Jim, didn't you tell me that you thought that Ron Sheldon?
I got Ron.
Ron was one of the writers. Ron did a draft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ron. I believe Ron said he was brought in when you cast De Niro as the arsonist. And
I'm not sure at what stage
just a little bit of
Ron
work.
came in, but he certainly did some writing on it for sure.
He told me he met with Brian and Ron Howard, and they all talked about that. When you were a kid, who didn't want to be a fireman?
Right.
And they were all, kind of keyed on doing the movie. They were all excited about it.
Yeah, there's definitely some Ron in there, that's for sure. But it was a bizarre time for me because it was the same year that I had just sold, my partner and I had just sold Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And we were going into production on that at the same time. We were in prep on that when this whole thing came up with Backdraft. And so both movies got made more or less simultaneously. And so I was actually spent most of the time that Backdraft was shooting in England, shooting
Prepping?
Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Oh, shooting.
While Backdraft was shooting in Chicago. So I wasn't on the set of Backdraft that much. Richard Lewis, one of my partners, was on the set.
When you do a movie like Backdraft, and Ron Howard says, "Okay, I'm ready to make this. I'm ready to go." Who's kind of responsible for crewing it up? If I'm not mistaken, you had a really great composer on that movie. Am I wrong? Somebody I know that was it Hans Zimmer.
Hans.
Yeah. You had Hans Zimmer. I mean, so who is it? Is that Ron Howard? Is that a combination?
Yeah, when you work
Ron?
with someone like Ron, he's going to be the controlling voice.
Okay,
he's like, I guess we're fond of saying that every movie has its 10-ton gorilla. It's like its main guy that is like controlling voice.
Yes.
When you're working with Ron Howard, it's definitely Ron Howard.
Okay,
but he's also very inclusive. He's not he's not a dictator. He's more democratic.
Good.
He's famous for asking anybody and being open to anybody's thoughts. Remember when we first screened the director's cut, we were all invited to the screening and we run the movie and we're all excited to give Ron our notes. He said, "Hold on one second," and he spoke to got on the intercom with the projectionist. He said, "Would you come in here and give us your opinion, please? You're the only person who's never seen the movie before."
Yeah.
That's Ron Howard. He's like he's open. He wants it to be the best movie, and anybody's got good ideas, he'll go for it. He's not the kind of guy, auteur who like shuts out everybody else. Right. We've all met those guys.
Yeah. One of the. Let me ask you, what is there's a, let's say 5 degrees of separation. What's that guy's name? The actor?
Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon, right?
Yeah.
It's not now that I'm this old and I'm like I feel like I'm 3 degrees. You got to be like 2 degrees of separation.
I've worked with Kevin Bacon. First degree.
There you go. One degree there. But one of the things that I found interesting for me, just only for me, on the movie that we're talking about a little bit is that there is first of all, if you go on Wikipedia or whatever, first of all, it also had Jennifer Jason Leigh, who's a brilliant actress, Rebecca De Mornay, who's great. David Crosby was a hippie or something. How did that happen? Do you remember?
I don't remember how it happened.
Okay,
no, I don't.
Well, you were probably off over.
Yeah, I was in England. I was. In the forest. Lost in the forest.
They also list, and he's not in the credits, although David Crosby's in the credits. Val Kilmer is listed on. Does Val have anything to do with anything?
I don't have any recollection of that. Billy Baldwin was basically the lead.
Yes. Here's the thing. There's a guy in that movie named Mark Wheeler. Mm-hmm. Okay, Mark Wheeler and I did a movie, a TV movie that Brian Grazer produced. Was one of my first movies, Jim. It was
Zuma Beach.
Zuma Beach.
Zuma Beach. That's
I remember that
Brian's first credit as a producer.
Yeah.
Brian Grazer's first
Yeah.
credit.
And Mark Wheeler, who is in the movie a lot, but never says anything. But he's always in shots, over and over
He's a
again.
fireman, yeah.
Going back, have you worked with Brian Grazer? Well, in any, I didn't realize when I started in with this stuff that you weren't kind of hands on.
Yeah.
From what you're saying, you were.
Well, I was very much hands on during the development phase, and again back in post production. But during production, I couldn't be in two places at once. We were very. I'm not complaining. We were very fortunate that we got two big movies made at the same time.
For sure.
And I'm very much a hands-on guy. I like to be fully involved. So, 100 days of filming on Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves kind of took over my life. And the two movies got released within 3 weeks of each other.
They
two
did.
the following summer in '91.
It's a big year for you, huh?
Yeah, it was a breakthrough year.
Wow.
I mean, up till then, we were struggling young filmmakers, trying to make ends meet, and suddenly we got two giant hits. We had number 2 and 3 movies of the year,
theaters.
I think.
Two and three movies of the year, box
office, yeah.
Oh,
number 1 was Terminator 2.
Oh yeah, that year. That's a
change in fortunes right there.
Yeah.
Considerable.
Well,
when I noticed when I was watching it, John, that it's a little bit because you're there in post, okay? So tell me, and anybody who's possibly listening to this, if you're there in post, how much does Ron Howard control post, and who is the ultimate person that makes decisions if they think it's too? I know I can remember Jim Cameron and Fox doing The Abyss, and Fox wanted it shorter, and it ended up shorter. Who like when you're?
Oh, it's definitely Ron. I mean, he's worked with the same 2 editors forever. You look at all these credits; he's got the same 2 guys.
Okay,
so they're a very good team, and one of the reasons I love Ron so much is I find he's got very mainstream taste, which I think I have. All his movies are so approachable. He doesn't make weird stuff. It's good stories, well told, well acted.
Yep.
And the one thing I love, Ron's movies are never too long. I have this pet hatred of movies that are too long. And
let me cut you off there for a second, okay? Because I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Backdraft is not a short movie. Backdraft is 2 hours and 14 minutes, I think, which is not a short movie. Especially these days, and maybe in that day.
These days, these big auteur
It's a
movies
breeze,
are 3 hours,
yeah.
3.5 hours long.
Well, that's if you're, if you're Cameron or Scorsese.
Well, there you go.
Or
So Ron is in that unique little final cut.
Gotcha.
Scenario.
Gotcha.
Guys who get to the final say. And most of these guys, Tarantino, Scorsese, you name them, they tend to let their movies run long. I mean, to my taste, they run long.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan movies. I mean, I'm a gigantic fan, but I've always ended up watching the movie. Go, I could see about 20 minutes I'd like to take out of that film. I never feel that way with Ron. I just feel like Ron's got the audience in mind. He's always This is not to put down any of those wonderful filmmakers, but it just it's happened to be. I always enjoy the way Ron keeps his movies within a watchable length to my short attention span.
Post production is 95% Ron Howard, or 100%. Okay. I don't know about
with
these
input,
things.
Always with input.
With input, which he
he's open to.
Asks for,
he
and
encourages.
He wants.
Yeah, and Brian's smart guy, very smart.
Yeah,
very successful producer.
Yeah. They've been together as long as you and Penn have been together, just about, right?
Yeah, they're a long time partnership. Yeah,
I used to read for them when I was at Paramount 40 years ago, and they hadn't even made Night Shift yet or Splash.
Yeah,
they just had offices at Paramount because Ron was doing Happy Days.
Yeah, it's a fascinating relationship. That's just clicks.
Let me just because I wanted to talk to you more about that movie, but since you weren't on it and you weren't there, And so the questions about what De Niro, like all these I kind of had a bunch of questions I wanted to ask you.
Wish I had more. Yeah.
No, that's okay. That's okay. You weren't there, right? I was there. I can ride a horse. I can,
I can do that. Yeah.
Let me ask you about a movie that I was not aware of at all, John. I
Hope you're not
never
going to
heard
pick
of
another
it.
one I wasn't there on.
Well, The Last Full Measure.
Okay.
Were you there on that one?
No. On the
Okay.
production. No. I was, I probably spent 5 or 6 years of my life trying to get The Last Full Measure made.
To get what made?
That movie, Last Full Measure.
Okay.
Made, yeah.
Say that again. You spent how long?
5 or 6 years, I guess, in development, like working with the whole team, Todd Robinson, the writer-director. We got it set up for production over and over and over again, and for one reason or another, the money fell through at the last minute. We had.
Do you remember where it came from? Like, where was it? Did you?
It's based on a true story.
Yes. Yeah. I know it.
From Nam, yeah, and it's based on real life incidents, and that Todd meticulously researched, and I found the screenplay so moving, so powerful that I threw in my lot with Todd and worked together with him and Penn, my partner, for years and years trying to get it made. And in the end, when it got made, I had to make a choice whether to quit school, where I was teaching by then as a professor at USC, to leave school and go on production, or it happened as these things do. In the end, just like that. One day it wasn't going. The next day, Todd calls me up and said, "We're off. We're going off to Georgia to shoot this movie. Are you on?" And I went, I can't quit in the middle of the semester. So, again, literally years of development, and
were you responsible
and very much
for?
involved in post production.
Okay, were you responsible for is it you that are responsible for that script? Is it are you?
No, I can't. I mean,
yes. not that you wrote it or anything.
I had a lot of input in it, but it's Todd. I wouldn't take anything away from Todd. It's his story.
But who has like a final say of like, well, I like yes, Todd, this is perfect. I like this. Go with this. That's you. Is that you in this case, or is that somebody else?
No, I mean, I'm just a voice in the writer's room. I'm just a voice giving him my notes, telling him where I think it could be better.
Is there nobody telling him no?
Well, ultimately, the financing entity controlled it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that movie had William Hurt, Christopher Plummer, Diane Ladd, Samuel Jackson, Amy Madigan, Ed Harris, who I know you've worked with a couple times, and Peter Fonda, among other people. And
I did work with Ed on another movie of Todd's called Phantom, about a Russian submarine.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen it.
You and two other people, I think.
Well, let me ask you a question, and if this is like too nervy, then we just like it's on my podcast, and if you say Michael, and
it's Michael,
and you're my guest, and if you don't want to talk about it, you don't need to talk about it.
Consider the source,
I watched it. You had incredible. I thought it was really good. I thought it was really good.
Oh, good.
When
I liked it.
When I know, but when I went and I read other people's opinions about it, one of the slants on that, like Kevin Costner's fucking accent in that other movie, okay? So everybody fucking talks about that. With this, they talked about the fact that nobody spoke with a Russian accent.
Yeah.
Do you look back? Do you remember? Is that you who makes that decision? Is that the filmmaker who makes?
Yeah. Well, jointly. I mean, nobody more importantly than Ed Harris in this situation,
right?
And I mean, I could talk to you for a long time about the whole Kevin Costner English accent situation.
Do you want to?
Well,
I mean,
sure,
could you? Because this is something.
I'll talk about it.
Please, thank you.
No, I mean, it was. I think bottom line is we thought that, Ed and David Duchovny trying to do Russian accents would end up sounding really dumb, really silly, like phony.
Okay.
They're not speaking Russian, they're speaking English. So
but for years and years and years, John,
that was a decision that we made, and maybe wrongly. I mean, certainly a lot of the critics did. With Kevin, I mean, we it really aggravates me that it's like, why did you hire Kevin Costner to do the movie? We hired Kevin Costner to do the movie because it was Kevin Costner that got the movie made.
Yep, of course.
We had this wonderful screenplay, and it got made because Kevin Costner wanted to be in it. So
right.
Forget that question.
Of course.
We're making the movie, we're making it with Kevin. So we brought in a dialect coach who worked with Kevin every day, and he worked with Kevin in post-production too. That is Kevin's best version of an English accent, but he's the movie star and he makes the movie. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine anybody but Kevin playing Robin Hood. He's extraordinary in that movie. So
right.
Who cares? We didn't care. I mean, we did our best to make it simulate an English accent, but the reality is, in medieval England, English accents were very, very different than they are today. So people are like hung up on, what does an English accent sound like today? They would have been speaking some kind of franglaise, some French English thing. And I don't know, it wasn't all the massive challenges of production of making a movie of that scale with that many people, with bows and arrows and flames in the forest and massive numbers of stunts. It was not our number one issue. Was
of course
to make a well-rounded, entertaining movie. So, I mean, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves is one of the most successful movies in Warner Brothers history. It was for the longest time the most successful movie.
How much did it cost, John?
It cost about $65 million.
Okay, and what year was it?
1990. It was shot and released in 91.
Okay,
it's been so enormously successful and has legs. I mean, it keeps on going. People still love that movie. I can't tell you the number of students who come in to USC and go, "Oh my God, you made Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves one of my favorite movies ever."
Wasn't there a competing Robin Hood project at the time at Fox that wound up going to TV? I mean, Prince of Thieves just sort of blew it out of the water for theatrical possibilities.
Yeah. Let me just finish for a second talking about the whole accent thing. I mean, clearly the vast majority of moviegoers could care less about the accent. They love.
I saw it. I don't remember ever.
They love Alan Rickman. They love all the action. They love
Morgan Freeman.
Uniqueness of the movie. I mean, it's a really fun movie, and a couple of critics early on picked on the accent, and it's become the thing that if you go do a deep dive on the internet, that's all people want to talk about, I guess. But it's so irrelevant to me. I mean, I made us a very, very successful movie that's lasted forever, and it's given a lot of pleasure to a lot of people. So I love it. So Jim was asking me about the competing Robin Hoods.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is kind of a fascinating thing because when when Penn Densham wrote the story for Robin Hood, we went out and pitched it, and at the time we were reasonably well considered as writers. We could get into the room at least to pitch, and we got no interest. I mean, 6 or 7 pitches, 6 or 7 rejections, and the common reaction was, "Men in tights in the forest? Come on!" I mean, that sounds really old-fashioned. We were going, no. It's magic.
They made a movie called Men in Tights.
A spoof of our movie.
I know. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
We're saying, no, you don't get it. This is like Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is like kick-ass, fun stuff. Forget the old Robin Hoods. It's nothing. I mean, not even slightly like that.
Right.
You know, it's not. It's an action film. It's action adventure. You know. They say, well, set it in the future. You know, put it in space. It'll be great. And we went bows and arrows. It's like, bows and arrows are fresh, man. Bows and arrows are exciting. You know, like, aren't you a little tired of gun duels? I mean, like, let's something different. So anyway, they had no interest. So we went, what are we going to do? Well, we believe in it. Let's write it. You know, so.
You and Penn. This is you and Penn.
Yeah, and there's a writer's strike going on, so we couldn't.
Perfect time for writing.
We couldn't
right?
get paid to write, so we just sat down and wrote it on spec.
Okay.
And we finished the screenplay right as the writer's strike was ending. I remember it was Valentine's Day. It was February the 14th. We finished the screenplay, and our agent went out to the town with it, spread it wide, and now. Coming off the back end of a writer's strike, suddenly the studios are buying. Apparently, they're buying now too. You know, right after this current strike, and there was suddenly a bidding war going on. All kinds of people love this screenplay. You know, in screenplay form, everybody got it. As a pitch form, nobody got it. Screenplay, everybody got it. So it was a bidding war. We sold the movie in the end to Morgan Creek. Which is a long story in and of itself, but we got Morgan Creek want to make a movie, and then as we started to gear up to go make the movie, as Jim mentioned, suddenly there were two other Robin Hoods out there. You know, somehow it got this idea that nobody wanted. Yeah. There's suddenly like something in the zeitgeist. There's two other films being
Sounds like
made.
Tombstone.
Fox had one, and TriStar had one, and Kevin Costner pretty well at that. I mean, Mike Ovitz called. And I guess he called the other two companies as well and says, Kevin Costner wants to play Robin Hood. So everybody's suddenly like, there was even an announcement in the trades that he was going to do the Fox one.
Oh, not yours.
Oh, really?
No, not ours.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up getting him, I think, because from the beginning he said we had the best screenplay. And we got Kevin Reynolds, who he'd worked with before on Fandango, to direct, and that kind of nailed the deal. That's when he decided to go ahead and do ours. So, I mean, literally, we were walking through the New Forest in England, scouting for locations, and there was another team in the New Forest at the same time, scouting for their Robin Hood.
Did the other two get made?
One of them got made as a TV movie. Yeah.
Okay.
But the Fox one went away. The TriStar one got made as a TV movie in England.
Did you do that all on locations, or was there a studio?
We were at Shepperton Studios in London for the interiors, for the castle interiors, for Nottingham.
What percentage of that movie would be interiors, roughly? Like
I would say a quarter to a third, something like that. I mean, it was very much an exterior movie. I mean, I think that's the joy of the film is the English countryside. We went to Carcassonne in France to shoot the town of Nottingham, the city of Nottingham.
In France?
In France, there's a medieval city in France called Carcassonne in the south near Nice. That's where the exterior walls of the city of Nottingham are the real town of Carcassonne. Where Robin Hood rides his horse down from the castle walls, and the guys climb the walls. And
was that a movie, John? It starts out with like, okay, you got $60 million to make the movie. Yeah, make it for 60. I mean, can you talk to me a little bit about like being over, whether it's television, whether it's movies, like when, was that?
Well, my attitude is always to be fiscally responsible. My attitude is, if somebody else's money, respect that. Treat it like it's your own money.
Right.
But in this case, Jim Robinson was a believer, a generous believer in the idea, in the concept. So the movie ended up being more expensive than he anticipated. We ended up shooting more days than we intended. It was more complicated for various reasons. There Kevin Reynolds had some ideas that he wanted to add to the story. Kevin Costner came in with some ideas of his, so the script kind of expanded, and the complications expanded, and it ended up costing more money. So a couple of times Jim came over, and I would say to him, "Okay, here's where we stand."
This is who, Jim
Robinson, who is the head of
the principal of Morgan Creek.
Okay, go ahead.
The owner of Morgan Creek. And we'd go over the situation with him and say, we can save money if we drop this scene. We can save money if we drop that scene.
Right.
And in the end, we did actually drop some of the material involving the witch was not shot. And but he always said, go ahead and spend the money.
He did.
I think it's worth it. I like this movie. I think it's going to do well. He believed in it. So it came in at 60, or it came in at more, or the original budget was less than 60. I don't honestly remember the numbers. I think it was the intention was to try and make it around 50, and it ended up being around 60.
Yes. Let me ask you about a movie like that, which you and Penn created. I mean, if it hadn't been for you and Penn, that movie just doesn't exist.
Right.
It just doesn't exist. Is there a I'm sure you're proud, but how fulfilling is it, to create something that, because I'm just always a part of somebody else's puzzle, and I might be able to say, well, I think, and usually if I have an opinion about something, usually it almost always has to do with my character, so I'm not creating anything. I'm just a piece of the puzzle. I'm one of your actors in one of these shows. What's it like to see something that started with you and Penn going, okay, well, how do we do this? And end up like,
it's the best. It absolutely is the best. I mean, that's, it's a dream come true from, playing as a little boy in the woods near my home in England, playing bows and arrows and pretending to be Robin Hood, to actually accomplishing the movie. And on my office wall here, there's a local newspaper story that says, "Movie mogul comes home." That's an article in my local paper where I sat next to the local critic for the first and last time in my career. I sat next to a critic.
All right.
Who came to the local Gaumont in Yeovil, and we watched the movie together. When my mother and my son and my wife photographed outside the movie theater. I mean, that's talk about a dream come true. It's extraordinary. So, yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and that's the dream. That's the dream that keeps us going. I mean, that particular case, I was more involved all the way through, not only because I wrote it and because I was the main guy on set while my partners were busy trying to make Backdraft in Chicago. Penn spent a lot of time in England too, but we also got more involved in post-production than originally planned because the director left the movie during post-production.
Why?
He had a falling out.
With who?
Well,
and you don't have to answer.
No,
any,
Kevin Costner.
They had a really bizarre.
Yeah, they had a bizarre relationship, and it was on again, off again, best friendship. Kevin Costner didn't like Kevin Reynolds' cut of the movie and asked him to go back to re-include some of the things that were cut out, and Kevin Reynolds was reluctant to do that, and the studio kind of had to step in and say, we support this
cut.
The star's vision.
Yeah.
So Kevin Reynolds walked away, and so Penn and I were asked to come in and complete the movie, which we did.
At what stage was this in post?
Yeah,
right after it was the first cut? After director's cut,
yeah,
okay.
So there was, only a few weeks left, frankly, before the movie came out. So we had to scramble.
Wow.
A guy called Stuart Baird came in, who was kind of a go-to editor.
Veteran editor. He directed a movie too.
He did, yeah. Very good director. Very good director. Wonderful man.
A Kurt Russell movie, as a matter of fact.
What movie is that, Jim?
executive. I think it's called Executive Decision.
Oh, I know
it's
that
kind
movie.
Of
I know that movie. Okay.
You gave me that screenplay years ago, and
Yeah.
you were talking about Stuart Baird at that time. But John, didn't you get your start as an editor? Didn't you tell me at one point
I
that,
did.
that
I did.
you're a member of
Yeah.
virtually every one of the guilds?
Yeah. I started out as an editor, so I was very comfortable in the editing room. I won a lot of editing awards in Canada, and I edited everything that we did. I mean, my pen and I made about 100 short films in Canada in a very short period of time. So I was certainly prolific. I mean, I was a young guy. I didn't sleep much. I just edited all night. That was my life.
Well, wait a second, Jim. That was in a day when, editing now and editing then, film as compared to digital are two completely different situations, where one, you're actually dealing with film and you're actually cutting film and sticking. Talk to me a little bit about when
I started out, it was 16 millimeter. I mean, I did some Super 8 as well, but 16 millimeter, and I had a machine called a movie scope, which didn't even run at 24 frames per second. You had to wind through a scope that saw the film. So you really didn't know how the film fit together until you took it away and put it in a projector and saw how it played.
Wow.
And then we moved on to a machine called the Moviola, which was Stuart Baird's is genius in Moviola. We were talking about him on Robin Hood. Recutting Robin Hood, in which we had, I think, 5 different editors all working at the same time under mine and Stuart's supervision, while Pam was off busy mixing the film. That's how it was going. We were doing the sound while Stuart and I were still editing the film. Stuart Baird is a classic Englishman. He was he wore the English hat. He carried the umbrella everywhere he went. and you see him in the editing room. He was a maniac. He would have film all over the place, wrapped around his shoulders and over his arms and hanging from the bin.
Right.
And somehow he knew what was what.
The mad cutter.
Somehow he knew what was what. And he'd make little chalk marks on the film and slice them together. And you go, what is he doing? I mean, he couldn't imagine. And then he'd run it through the Moviola. It worked. He had just this uncanny instinct of knowing what the audience wanted to see next, when to go to a close-up, when to change angles, when to go to a wide shot. He just instinctively knew it. And I figured I was pretty good at it because I've spent my whole life editing. But Stuart, when it comes to editing, I've never seen anybody quite like it. So, yeah, it was film. And back in 1991, we were still working with film, still working with those old-fashioned machines that
when did that cross over?
Long gone now.
What year was that crossed over from film to about what?
I'd say
5-year period of time?
Around 2000. Really,
around the turn of the century.
I don't know.
We really saw.
Yeah, I can't even place it really. I kind of nowadays, I don't have the same adeptness with the
newer stuff,
with the digital equipment that I did back in the day working with film. So now I tell the editors what to do rather than doing it myself.
And I understand. And you said, the word instinct. Mm-hmm. And instinct, I think, is an important word for any kind of art, and cutting is definitely an art. How do you teach? First of all, everybody that I know has a screenplay. Mm-hmm. My brother in Lake Havasu City has a screenplay.
I just finished one, by the
way. How do you let's just take? Do you teach students how to cut, the pacing, and is that something that is teachable? Is writing something that is teachable?
Yeah,
talk to me about that.
I think it's all teachable, but you have. I mean, it starts with the individual vision of the filmmaker, and I always encourage my students to have their own voice, to know what they want. So I think the best stories come from the heart, come from the gut, come from instinct. So I try not to inhibit the the ideas that come from the filmmaker. But so when it comes to teaching, it's more about making suggestions. Putting yourself in the place of the viewer, the audience, and saying, I feel like this scene is going on too long, and I feel like the dialogue here is getting repetitive. I think you could make it shorter and it would be better. Or the opposite. Like, I feel like it's not clear. I think you really need to go to another angle here to remind us where we are, or we need an insert of something to make it clear what this object is they're talking about. So those kinds of things you can teach. I come at it from the person who's got a lot of experience, but mostly from the point of view of an audience member, a viewer, watching something. And I think that most movies are a little bit too long, so I'm always trying to encourage people to do it in less time, with less words. It's a movie, not a talkie, right? It tends to be a little too many words in most films and most early first drafts of scripts. Most first drafts of script, all the actors are saying exactly what they're thinking, and most of us are always like something a little more obtuse in real life, the way we talk, and so I'm just sharing my knowledge and my experience and hoping that it's useful to the filmmaker. We have guidelines. It's like from the knowledge of TV shows. The TV shows, back in the day when we were doing Magnificent Seven together, they had to be an exact length, right? 42 minutes and 17 seconds or whatever it is. Right. That's dictated by the network. So if you got more than that, you got to figure out ways to cut it down. If you've got a little bit more time, maybe you can run a few shots a little bit longer than you intended. And so we have the same deadlines usually with student films. I teach a class where every movie cannot be more than 12 minutes. So how do you use the 12 minutes to the max? It's it's useful guidelines, honestly. And I find for the most part, students are just really, really smart. And the smartest ones are like Ron Howard. They listen to other people. They want to hear what other people think, and they don't have to do what everybody suggests. It would be complete chaos if a movie was a complete democracy. But they should always listen for ideas that might help them. You don't make movies in the end by consensus, but it's a good idea to pick other people's brains and have them help you. Let them help you.
I've always admired that of directors. The ones who I think are really smart and really usually get it done correctly or are open to suggestions. Nobody has a monopoly on genius. And when you can recognize a good suggestion, let's do it.
Well,
sure.
to add to what Jim said, I've talked about this so many times about Jim Cameron. Jim Cameron will listen to you. Jim Cameron will change. Oh, he would. When I was working with him, he would change his script if he heard a better idea than his. Mm-hmm. And it didn't happen very often. And you don't want to approach. I don't want to approach you when I'm doing Magnificent Seven and come in. I think that I got to know. I got to be able to defend what I'm saying, and certainly with Jim. But
let's talk about Magnificent Seven, because the TV series that you and I worked on together. I mean, I was a firm believer that you guys, the actors, knew the characters better than the writers, and I certainly ran afoul of the writers on many occasions when I took your point of view. I knew that you knew. I knew that A, you knew the character really, really well, and B, you understood the genre really, really well, and C, that you're a really good storyteller and you understand movie making. So when I heard the Spurs at the end of the corridor coming down to my office, you in costume, ready to go, I knew that I was about to get some notes on the script
on the next shot.
But what I loved about it was you came in and you didn't just come in and say, "I don't like this, change it." You came in and you said, "How about I change this to that?" So you always had a creative solution. So how can I not love that? You know, I mean, and then you'd leave, and I'd go across the hall to the writers' room, and I said, you know, the line that
Spurs just walked in.
My character says,
Pick up your pens.
Let's change that. No, or he points out that this exposition you have in this scene, the audience already knows that from the two scenes before. Right. We can eliminate it. Right. So they didn't always like it that I went that way, and I'm sure there were times when I disagreed with you and said no. But or tried to explain to you why it was there, that it had some implication for the next coming episode, or some, you know, that it somehow impacted one of the other characters or whatever. I don't know. I mean, we didn't disagree very often, I know, but that was the way it should be to me. I mean, I loved that part of it, and I was very blessed in that I was basically a sole showrunner on that show. I mean, MGM gave me a really free rein, and CBS gave me a really free rein to deliver the show that I wanted. Maybe they erred. Maybe they'd been a bit more dictatorial. And the show would have lasted longer, but I think the show is pretty damn good. Huh?
It does, and it holds up very well. I had a chance to see most of them just a matter of 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, 20 years after you guys made them, and gosh, it really holds up well.
They're still out there, yeah. And we had a very, very loyal following, and we had a tremendous fan club who still hold gatherings to celebrate the show. And they know.
We'll get back to this, but do you remember when we first met? Do you remember the first time we met?
I was going to ask you that, because I knew that I already knew you. By the time we cast you for Magnificent Seven, you and I before. Already had met, but I don't remember why.
Well, you and Penn must have gotten in contact with L'Amato and said, you know, we like Michael.
Yeah,
we want to have a meeting with him. And Ed L'Amato said, hey, these two guys are, you know, the real deal here, and you should go down and meet them. And that was pretty early on, Jim. You can answer this because I've forgotten the name of the writer who wrote those books that they've. There was a French movie about a sheriff. And
Jim Thompson.
Jim Thompson. Jim Thompson. What was the name of that? What was the name of that movie?
Pop 1280. Well,
Pop 1280.
The book is Pop 1280. He wrote The Getaway, After Dark, My Sweet, those kind of noirish stories. And Pop 1280 was made as a French movie called Coup de Torchon.
Yep.
Back in the 70s.
Yep.
I love your accent, Jim.
Well, I'm reaching.
I'll be in France next week at this time going to a film. I'm going to a film festival with the guy who directed the Divide is going to be there, and they invited me over, so I'll be over there.
All right.
John, let me.
That was back in the late 80s.
Hold on, Jim. Look, do you have more to talk about with the Magnificent Seven?
Oh,
did you say?
But you reminded me of when we first met.
I wanted to ask you.
So we had a general meeting, and we talked about this. One of
we had a general meeting, and you were like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "What do you want to do?" And I don't remember the meeting. That's all I remember.
That went nowhere.
Well, I remember pitching you Pop 1280.
Oh, okay.
That's what, and I'm sure that your guys were like, "What?" That's not exactly Robin Hood, Michael. It was kind of an offbeat, but Jim had turned me on to Thompson, and I had read all of his novels and a lot of his novels, and his a lot of times in the movies they make of him, they take the dialogue right out of the book, and it just doesn't. Have you ever taken a book and what do you call it?
Adapted.
Yeah,
many times. Yeah.
Give me an example.
I've adapted three or four novels that haven't gotten made yet.
Okay.
So I adapted a Tom Wolfe novel called "I Am Charlotte Simmons." I adapted an
really?
book called "Infinity of Mirrors."
Do you have to pay Tom's Wolfe estate or him or whatever?
It was very expensive. It ended up being the death knell because when it came to renewing the option, the
how long do you
finance
have
I
to
didn't
write
want to
that?
pay.
How long did you have to write something?
I don't know. I adapted. I'm pretty quick when I sit down to do a rewrite. I probably wrote it in 3 months, but we had a year's option. But time goes away when you're trying to sell it.
Yeah.
And so when you don't sell it, the option's up, and it just goes back to him.
Yeah. We got killed by yet another Writers Guild strike in this situation. By the time the strike went out, when the strike was over, the agent at CA told me they'd sold the option to someone else.
What about how do you feel AI is going to be affecting our business? Please talk to me about.
I'm no kind of expert on that. I don't want to predict where it's going. I mean, just that it's a reality. I mean,
Do you deal with it at all with your students?
Yeah. We use it very much for in the design factor in creating images to help sell a project. You can to ChatGPT, you can give them basic information. Say, I want a vampire, and he's dressed this way, and he's black, and it's night, and it's a sunset, and it's a old Western town, like.
Okay.
And they'll come back with an image that is just stunning.
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you could do. So that's the way I primarily use it. Is to create images to support the project. One of my sons, I've just finished a screenplay, and one of my sons is helping me create a lookbook using primarily AI images because the story
AI
I'm writing about, there
yes.
aren't any real life images, so it's because it's set in the future. So he's coming up with images to support the story so that we can help explain. Like back in the day when I was trying to tell Robin Hood, if we'd had AI images of guys with bows and arrows in the forest, I probably could have sold it more better than just with the verbal pitch. So it has value clearly, and it is the wave of the future. But specifically how it's going to impact it, I'm not the guy to answer that.
Do you have and have you always had agents? An agent or a man, somebody that is like. Do you have an agent you pay 10% to on Backdraft or
Back then we had agents. Yeah, as agents as writers, agents as producers.
William Morris or ICM?
I've done both.
Both, right? Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Nowadays I don't. Nowadays part of my incentive I say to an agent is I say, if you can sell this, you'll get 10%. Or if I'm trying to get their client, I'm optioning a book right now that is controlled by CAA. So when I'm talking to the book agent at CAA, I said, you option this book to me as a producer, and when the movie gets set up, you can get 10% of my fee.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
You're producing fees. Yeah, and that's a common.
Let me ask you about producing fees and the business, Hollywood. Have you ever? And I want to know more about how solid the industry is as far as when you think you're going to get paid something, you get paid something. You think you're going to get back end money, that you get back end money, like and how.
I imagine streaming has really affected how that has changed over the past couple of years.
Streaming has changed that. Oh, yeah. I understand that. The thing about the Screen Actors Guild is it was and probably still is. I don't know. It's a good union, strong union. And so things always kind of went the way I expected them to go. When you're in your position and you make Robin Hood and you make Backdraft and they're the number 2 and number 3 movies, you have back end on that, right? Never
seen any.
Never seen any.
No, I mean but the business is notorious for that. Is that if you get net profits? And at the time I made both those movies, I wasn't sufficiently big name that I could negotiate anything better than net profits.
Okay,
net profits basically
nothing.
Don't exist. I mean, the only people who've ever got money from net profits are people who've made movies that are really, really cheap. They made and have gone out and made a fortune. You know, like a few horror movies that have.
Blair Witch Project might
Blair Witch
be,
Project.
you know, you almost need something like that.
Great big fat Greek Wedding, I believe, did that. You know, movies that were just like underdogs that didn't cost anything and ended up being ginormously successful.
Right.
Most of the time, the studios are able to write off all the potential profits on overhead and on
television the same way, John?
Distribution fees and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Beat them up.
We did quite well, I have to be honest, on the Outer Limits. They treated us well. They gave us advance against profits.
Who's they?
MGM.
MGM, right.
MGM, yeah. I mean, I don't know the details are that interesting to your listeners, but I mean, Robin Hood and Backdraft, never seen any money back end. Outer Limits saw quite a lot of money.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. So you were young. You're coming up. You make some big movies. You make a name for yourself. Then you're able to negotiate for better deals when you. Yeah. So
get more successful. You get higher fees, and you get better chance of getting back end. But I get money, small amounts of residual still from Robin Hood based on my writing. The Writers Guild are another very strong union, the same way SAG is a strong union, and so they protect their members. But as a producer, it's really hard to get a deal.
Okay, so and that's what do you think, John?
Well, DGAs is by the same way. They're good.
DGA, Writers Guild, Directors Guild, and Actors Guild. They're all pretty protective, right? Is it okay? What do you think, John? Do you talk to your students, or do you when we were coming up, there was ABC, there was CBS, there was NBC, and there was
maybe Fox.
There was Fox, and there was Universal, and there were a few studios, and there was Roger Corman's company, and that was it. That was effing it. You know, that's the world that you grew up in, and that's the world that I grew up in. What do you think now about the extensive amount of content that is out there that
I think everybody's still trying to figure it out. I mean, these companies are just constantly changing. As we speak today, Paramount is up for sale, and I don't know, is Paramount Plus going to have a future? It's constantly in flux, so it's really, really hard to predict the future. I think the good news is for young filmmakers today, students coming out of film, there is now a niche audience for smaller films that they used not to be. I mean, we were talking earlier about some of the black students I have. There is now an identifiable black audience that they used not to be.
Of course, yeah.
And I was trying to make a movie that was based on a subject involving primarily black players, and it was in sports. There wasn't perceived to be an audience for it. No one in the foreign market is interested in that. I would be told. These days, those movies existed. The movie that I told you I'm making at USC, I think there is now an identifiable audience for that movie, whereas a little while ago there might not have been.
Right.
So the timing is right. There's LGBT movies. There's you name it. There's an audience for it now that used not to exist. So, and I think that's a good thing. And I believe that my students are coming into the business at a time when the entertainment business as a whole is doing quite well, but there's still absolute chaos with regards to theatrical market, for instance. Like that's clearly in trouble. I don't hesitate to say that it's dying, but it's clearly in trouble.
John, I for 10 years, I've been predicting that the movie theaters were going to go away just because of convenience. And that's why I was told that fast food restaurants like McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's convenient. You just go, you buy, dinner. It's convenient. back in the day, when Jim and I went to see Taxi Driver, which was a movie that kind of changed our lives, or my life for sure, a movie that I just absolutely adore. We had to get in a car, and we had to drive to a movie theater, and we had to maybe pay for parking in Hollywood, and then we had to pay for popcorn, and then you walk into a theater, and there might be seats available, there might not be seats available, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I've been saying I'm surprised it hasn't happened already. I guess, with Barbie and Oppenheimer, whatever last year, I guess there's still. Seems to me that most of the stuff that's in theaters now is either for kids or Marvel movies. Not that too much independent stuff. And I see every little town I go into has got a theater that's nobody goes to anymore.
Yeah, no, it's really tough for theater owners, that's for sure. There's some horror movies that still there's an identifiable audience, but again, that's young people for the most part.
Yeah,
want to go be scared. It's good date night material,
right?
But it's
scare your girlfriend into your arms,
right?
So you're done with your year this year, and now
school wise,
yeah,
we're on a kind of August through May cycle. So yeah, I'm off.
And you're going
good gig being a professor. I get 6
months John,
off
you're in the producing program? Are you a professor in the producing program, the Peter Stark program at USC?
It's not the Peter Stark program. No, it's the main program.
Okay.
So yeah, we teach all production, directing, editing,
cool.
cinematography.
Cool.
You name it. And I teach a writing class, I teach a directing class, and I teach a producing class.
Can you teach? Would you please teach me soday to write or write a script? Because I'm really good at picking apart other people's.
I'd like to jump in, if I may, and tell you a little bit about something completely unique that I managed to accomplish at USC, which is we're making feature films. We've made 9 of them now, and it's pretty crazy, and no one has ever, no film school. I believe Chapman made one feature film, but I don't think film schools around the world have ever tried to make feature films before, and certainly no professionals have ever made feature films the way that we make them, which is we write them in a writer's room. I come up with the idea, and I go into a writer's room, and I have 8 students, and we write a screenplay in one semester. The following semester, we go make the movie. And the directors, I use typically about 10 directors. I break the script up into 10 episodes, kind of like a TV show.
Oh, yeah.
But because I have the same production designer, the same cinematographer, and the same producers, showrunners, it's all consistent. It all looks the same. Same way a TV show's episodes all look the same from week to week.
Right.
So it's a real consistency. And most of the heads of departments, so the designers, as I mentioned, and the cinematographers and producers are all recent alumni. There's the best of students who just graduated. And it shouldn't work. It's crazy. No, it's insane. No one's ever done it before. But these movies are amazing. We've made 9 of them now, and some of them have been, the last one we did, Voodoo Macbeth, had theatrical release. It's done extremely well.
Yeah, I was going to ask if they get any kind of theatrical release, or are they available?
Well, yeah, I mean, the trouble is that we were talking earlier about the theatrical market. What is the theatrical market now? We opened it at the Laemmle in Santa Monica to a full house. The second night there was half full. Third night there was hardly anybody there. I mean, that's you can't support a movie release with major marketing. You're not going to have a big life in the theaters anymore. So that movie has won 23 film festivals, I guess. It's been shown around the world.
Wow.
Enormously successful. We just finished the latest one, which is a gangster movie starring Linda Hamilton, playing an old lady who used to be a gangster mole, telling the story of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Really, really fun. It's called Jack and Lou, a gangster love story. And I was telling Michael earlier, we did a podcast during COVID. We did a podcast of the movie.
This is very interesting.
Starring Lisa Kudrow.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was during COVID.
Explain because you never stop, John. So there's the bug out there, and you do what?
Well, you can't let COVID stop you.
Right, there you go. No, I got no.
So for two semesters, we kept on making movies, and we would the directors and all the heads of department would work via Zoom, talking to the actor in their home and instructing them where to put the camera, where to put the lights, where to put the props, where to put the set dressing, and we were directing these remotely. Now, you think that would be chaos, right? Well, these 6 films made there, and in all the classes at USC, there was a whole lot of other films being made. They're really, really good. But what we did, I didn't wanted to take on the idea of trying to do a feature film that way. So what we did with this Jack and Lou, A Gangster Love Story, which has now been finished as a movie, is we performed it as a podcast. So we hired professional actors, and they're all in their own homes, their own little recording booths in their homes. Mm-hmm. They're doing the lines, and then we cut it all together, and there it is. It's a real dramatic story.
It's incredible.
Wow. Lisa Kudrow played the role that in the finished film now Linda Hamilton plays for the podcast. Lisa Kudrow played the character. Yeah, so it's really fun. Anyway, the process of making films this way is an original. The movies now are called USC Originals, and the originals in many ways. It's the original way of making a movie, and the original to USC.
I'm going to look those up.
Yeah, check them out, man.
I'm really
good,
curious.
Really good.
About
the first
that.
one we did was Don Quixote, which was on Netflix, and Voodoo Macbeth is probably the most successful, and I think Jack and Lou, A Gangster Love Story is going to be. Hopefully, it'll have a real good life because it's really well made. I mean, it's kick-ass gangster movie.
Is the podcast pretty available?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you should be able to find it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up.
Yeah,
well, I think that, where are we?
Hour 20.
Okay, so this is about the how long I like these to be, John. I think I could talk to you
don't make
all
it
day.
Too long.
Don't make it too long, right? We have to cut it. I'll end it with just something that's I think is kind of when I was working for you. This is
with me, please.
I was working with you. I was working for you. I was working both.
I considered you my creative partner in the process.
Well, I know, and I really appreciate that. There are a lot of people that don't feel that way. But I was working with you when I used to get a script when I was doing a television show. And every week I would get a script, and I would go through it, and I go like, oh, there's a good scene. There's another good scene. Oh, my God, look at that. Oh, I got some great stuff in this episode. That's really good. This is a great week. This is fantastic. Cut to me 20 years later doing a television series, right? I'm looking through the script. There's a day off. There's another day off. I get paid the same amount of money. There's another day off. I'm only working 2 days. I love this script. So, John, you're the most high-profile person from the film industry that I've been able to talk to. And I just want to thank you so much for very quickly agreeing and being how you've always, I mean, you're just a wonderful person.
A font of information and entertainment, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I just wanted to thank you for immediate, when I called you, I talked to some other people, and you were like, yes, Michael, yes. When can we do this? Give me a date. And I
always say yes to you, Michael.
Thank you. That's not true, but anyway. All right. So I think that we're finished here, and sometimes when I'm on the other side, it feels odd when the person finishes. I'm like, oh, I had more to say or whatever. But that it's like you say, we gotta let it go. And you got things.
Movie making, as long as you'll give me a microphone to talk into.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks, John.
Okay. My pleasure.